Texas represents leadership, hope, patriotism, and pride. It's a place where people of all cultures and creeds live, work, and raise their families together. It's a place full of opportunity. Unfortunately, under Republican control, Texas is going backward. That trend is coming to an end. It's time for a new vision in Texas. I am running for Texas Controller because I want to be part of the new generations of leaders who will bring Texas back to the 21st century and position it for a strong future. I am committed to a transparent tax administration and to establishing a vibrant economy with thriving jobs, so you can provide for your family and maintain a healthy life balance. You deserve an inclusive Texas, a Texas that embraces diversity, where no matter where you were born, the color of your skin, or the language you speak, you are welcome. You deserve a Texas that treats women equally in all areas, including equal pay and the right to make their own medical decisions. You deserve a Texas that recognizes that love is love. A Texas where all faiths, traditions are welcome, and where church and state are truly separating governmental decisions. A Texas that welcomes new business ventures and give employees the right to organize and unionize. A Texas that respects and embraces data and science, where government leaders do their elected jobs of working for the best interests of all Texans, not special interest groups. A Texas that guarantees easy access to voting for all citizens. You deserve a Texas that repeals race suppression, where no matter your zip code, you will have access to health care, clean water, electricity, high-speed internet, and excellent education, and the resources to support your family. You deserve a Texas where you feel safe in our cities and towns, as well as in your own home. That Texas is possible with new leadership. I am running for office because it's time to bring this new vision to life. It's time to bring Texas back to the people.
Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Progressive West Texas, the show where we talk to people looking to make a positive change in our area. I'm your host, Cannon Roberts, also known as West Texas Progressive on TikTok. Today we have a really good show for you, and we tackle a really difficult subject. So first, we're joined by Angelina Mojica, who is running for the at-large position on the Lubbock Independent School District School Board. We're then joined by two of her colleagues, Terri Rodriguez, who works for Catholic Charities and founded the Kinship Program here in Lubbock. Then we're also joined by Tameka Riley, who's with the Methodist Children's Home of Lubbock. So April is Child Abuse Awareness Month. And a report was just released that says Lubbock has the second highest rate of child abuse in the state. And so that is the topic that we discuss today. We talk about why we might have some of these issues. We talk about how poverty is also translated or interpreted to be child abuse, and it's not. And so what resources are out there for families dealing with poverty, trying to keep their family together? And we have a lot of good suggestions. We hear a lot of good solutions. We hear a lot about education, and I'm very passionate about education. And I'm really excited to hear about all the opportunities there are for people looking to get more education about how to be a better parent, about the resources that are out there to help them. And we also find out what each of these people working in this area, these social workers who are trying to help families, we find out what brings them hope. And so let's jump into it and meet Angelina Mojica. Angelina, hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Cannon, for giving me on the show. Thank you.
No problem. So first, remind us what office you are running for right now.
Yes. So running for the LISD School Board of Trustees at-large position.
Okay. And why did you run?
I decided to run. I was approached by several community members, and they're just aware of who I am in the community, what I do in the community, my heart, my passion for the community of Lubbock. And so when the Dupree school closure was announced, I was approached, and it really pulled to my heart because I know a young lady that attends that school who I've worked with their parents in the adoption process, and I know what displacement does to children. And this young lady has already gone through so much. I wanted to do more. And so that really pulled to my heart. It is such a sadness to see schools close because it disintegrates a neighborhood. It's like a hole just knocked and punched into a neighborhood, and it's so sad and disheartening. But not only that, as I continue to work in the Lubbock community, I also hear and see and firsthand teachers who are struggling to just stay positive in their school environment, and students that are struggling to stay positive in their learning environment. And all of that is just calling out to me saying, you work with these students. What else can we do? What else can we do? What else can I do as a active community member? And so just knowing all of that, experiencing all of that, I stepped up and I said, yes, it's time for me to be an example and lead by example.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there. You said that you work with these students.
Yes.
So explain to our audience how do you what is your day job? How do you work with these students in the moment?
So I work for a nonprofit agency. I'm the program director. I run that program. So what I do is I build partnerships with the Lubbock Independent School Districts and partnerships with the community of Lubbock, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit agencies and businesses. And I bring in resources in the program that I run to provide stability, education, skill building for families, and in the schools, mentorship programs, working with children that have been identified by counselors, social workers, or community and school workers that need just a little extra support. They need just a little extra partnership in being successful in their school environment. And these are children that just need to know that there is someone out there that cares about them, that sees their struggle, that can understand their struggle and help them build the coping skills needed to be resilient in moving forward in their lives.
Okay. And so do you feel like that maybe gives you more insight than what maybe a realtor or a banker might have, which is often who runs for these offices here in our community?
And you know what? I think yes, it does. I definitely have the experience because I do it on a daily basis. But it doesn't really matter your profession, because if you're someone that gives in servitude of others, someone that volunteers your time and that makes the effort, then you would have that knowledge, you would have that experience. But if you choose not to, well, then that's your choice. But my choice is to walk in what I've been called to do, and that is to serve the Lubbock community. Lubbock is my home. I'm very passionate about it. Like others, I've tried to step out of Lubbock, but I keep getting pulled back in. And I know that there's a reason. And I feel like that's what I'm doing today, is walking in that reason.
Yeah, I mean, and that happens. You hear that story over and over again in Lubbock, that people try to leave and they come back, and there's something that keeps us here. So what are some of your top issues? What do you want to do once you're in office?
I definitely want to bring consistency in leadership. One thing that I've taken notice just in my engagement with teachers in social settings and whatnot, and just in passing conversations, I know that some of the school systems, you have a really good administration that is fully supporting the teachers and trying to find solutions and bring up morale and retain teachers in their school district. And then there's other schools that are struggling. They're falling apart. Teachers are looking to jump ship, so to speak, because they don't have that support. And I feel that transparency, honesty, communication needs to be consistent, regardless of what's being communicated. It needs to be communicated effectively, efficiently, and accurately, because people want to know reasons why things are being made, decisions are being made, things are being said. People want to understand that. And I think as a leader, you should be willing to give that information. So I do want to bring consistent leadership to the LISD school board. I want to bring support to our teachers. I want to look at reasons why teachers don't feel supported in some schools and why they do. What's the issue there? What can we do? What's the solution? I want to bring solution focused strategies to the school board to help the retention of teachers, paraprofessionals, and all faculty. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, I want to bring resources to the school districts as well. I work as a resource program in the community. And so I want to be able to bridge that over into the Lubbock school system so that not only teachers have support, but students have support and families have support.
Interesting. Okay. So I want to focus on that last part that you said, that families have support, because a lot of times we don't think of school as being a family issue. It is the kids do it, like whoever is at the school building during the day, that's who's affected by education. But it's a family thing, and it always has been. So what are some of those, what do families need to be better supported?
Well, families need to understand the way the school system operates. Some of the things that I've run into, particularly with children that have disabilities, whether those are learning disabilities or behavioral disabilities or educational disabilities, parents need to understand how to maneuver and navigate the resources that the school offers. And not only that, how do we communicate with the teachers that something isn't working for our child? Because what I've seen and heard and kind of experienced as I coach families day to day is I've talked to a teacher, but they're not giving me any responses, or I've talked to the administration and they're not giving me any responses. So why is that happening? Mm-hmm. What can I do as an advocate to step in there and say, okay, let's look at both things and being a liaison for a family so that they can better understand what is being communicated? Because sometimes the jargon, the vocabulary that's being used isn't understood. So how do we break that down even further so that it can be understood, and then parents understand what next steps they can take for their children? What are the opportunities out there? If it's not provided in a school system, where can it be provided?
Mm-hmm. And so it seems like this you have a focus on transparency and communication. And so it seems like this could be helpful throughout. More communication and transparency to the teachers, why decisions are being made, more accountability and transparency to the parents about what options they have. Why do you think that's so difficult sometimes? Because I know that working in I taught at community colleges, and I know that on that level there was a lack of transparency too. And so it seems like in a lot of our educational systems, we struggle with that. And why do you think that is?
I think it's because we run up against the mindset of this is the way it's always done. And when we run up against that, and we don't, and when I say we, I say families in the community or people that aren't in that system or don't understand that system. When we face those paradigms, when we face those thoughts and those habits, it's hard for us to rebuttal against those because we don't understand. And so it's so easily dismissed when we run up against that this is the way it's always done mentality. Then how, as a parent in the community, am I supposed to fight that if I am not equipped with the knowledge or the skill or even the communication skills needed in order to advocate for my child?
Yeah, no, that is really important. So, why don't we continue to talk about the support that families need? That's going to be kind of the rest of our discussion today. And so let's bring on our guest, and we'll keep this discussion, and we'll keep talking about local families. So, hello, Terri and Tameka. How are y'all?
Hello, how are y'all? Thank y'all.
Thank y'all so much for being on. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and I really think it'll be enlightening to a lot of our audience. And so, before we are going to talk about some pretty heavy topics, but before we get there, I do like to ask my guest, what is their favorite thing about Lubbock or West Texas? We hear about the problems. We're going to discuss some of the problems here in a little bit. So I want to start off with a little bit of positivity and talk to y'all about what you actually really like about our city and our area. So Angelina, why don't you go first with that?
Yeah, sure. So Lubbock is my home, born and raised in Lubbock. So my roots are here.
Mhm.
And that I have my morals, my values, my culture is Lubbock. And I like it because it does offer opportunity for us to grow. I think there is a growing diversity in our community, and I embrace that. I think that is the next step for evolution. So I definitely love that that's an opportunity here in Lubbock.
Excellent. Tameka, what about you? What do you like about our city?
So born and raised in Lubbock as well. Lubbock is just home. When I think of Lubbock, I just think of family.
Mhm.
I would say when the community needs to get together and get something done, Lubbock is big for community. We have some strides to make there, but I think we're on our way. And again, I also see family when I think of Lubbock, whether that's my own or just strong families here in Lubbock that get together again when something is needed, when there's a goal to be reached, then people pull together and try to get it done.
Mhm. Excellent.
Yeah.
So Terri, what about you?
Well, just like Angelina and Tameka, born and raised here in Lubbock, Texas. Texas Tech Red Raider fan, biggest fan. When I think about Lubbock, I think about the country roads, those drives, the wildflowers, and the different things you can see out there. But, more family also. I see a lot of family.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, so after that little bit of positivity, now we're going to talk about some of the obstacles our community faces. And so this week, it came out that Lubbock, for the second year in a row, has the second highest rate of child abuse in the state. And we're beat. The one city that beat us is one that I also am very familiar with, is Abilene. They're number one. And honestly, I like that made sense to me because I have spent so much time in Abilene, and I do feel like Abilene and Lubbock are very similar in ways that even Lubbock and Amarillo aren't. Definitely Lubbock and Midland are not. And so some of that, kind of made sense to me. But I do know that a lot of people, that surprises them, that they do not expect Lubbock to have such a high rate. And so my first question, and Terri, I'll let you go first. Were you surprised by these numbers? And should other people be as surprised by these numbers?
Well, Robert, let me tell you something. At first, I would say I was very, very surprised. But once you start working with families in the community and engaging and collaborating with other agencies and getting to know these families, it doesn't come to a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that yes and no. But yes, it was surprising. But once you start working with families, you see all walks of life, and it can make some changes in one's life, even my own life.
Angelina, what about you? Did this surprise you?
I'm on the fence as well. I mean, no and yes. Yes, it surprised me because just coming from a very unstable background as a childhood myself, you always think it's just me. It's just in my house. But as I began to educate myself and step into the social work field, yes, I was taken back because of the amount of numbers, amount of cases. I worked for Child Protective Services at one point, and I had had a lot on the caseload here, and just so. At first you're looking at it and you're like, oh, it's just me, and you don't really think about those things. But then once you step into it, you start building that awareness, and your eyes are open, and so it doesn't surprise you.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way that you frame that, because you say that when you were in an unstable house, you assumed it was just you, and I feel like I grew up in a very stable house, and I assumed that everybody lived that way. And so what is that disconnect? Why do we think it's only us, when things are unstable? But, because I think that's why people are surprised, is because their assumption is, no, everybody is like me. And so why do you think that might be, that we have that disconnect between it's just us when it's unstable, but when it's stable, then everybody's like this?
I want to go back to, why Tameka loves Lubbock, because when there is a emotional connection to a cause that's calling for community, we all come together. But when you're that person in your own crises or your own situation, you isolate yourself. You isolate yourself so that you don't have anybody coming in, because I was raised very much what stays at home, what happens at home stays at home. And so you don't openly discuss those things. And I know I didn't as a child, and I didn't know I could. I didn't know that there was someone out there that would care. And I think too, as an adult, sometimes there's hesitation of stepping in, because what am I going to attract back if I try to tell someone there's a better way to handle that situation? And I've stepped into those situations as a woman, and I get that backlash. I do. What do you know? You don't know me. A lot, and it's just a lot of hostility. And so then you try to back off, because you're like, I can't intervene, but you can. There's just a way to do it.
Interesting. And Tameka, what about you? Was this surprising?
The number is surprising. I would think that we would rate pretty high up there, maybe top 10. I probably wouldn't have thought number 2. So it is surprising to me. I just believe that probably for the longest, many years ago, how people raised their kids, the upbringing and discipline was the norm, and people didn't see it so much as abuse. And so I think it's kind of an eye-opener to me on how much that has transcended into most of the things that we grew up with our parents doing as far as discipline is now abuse. So I think people don't really see probably Lubbock as being one that would have one of the highest ones. But when you work in that field every day and you're seeing those families, then it's kind of more upfront in your face, and you understand that more and you see it more than others. But looking from the outside, if I didn't work in the field that I do, I definitely it would have been a shock to me probably.
That's really interesting, because we are known as a conservative area. We are known as an area that wants to move very slowly. So do you think that mindset is maybe what's causing this number to be high? Is that people, a lot, and even when Angelina was talking about our school district, she was saying we kind of have this mindset of what's the way it's always done. So is that what do you feel like people are having a hard time letting go of some of these things? Because, well, this is what my parents did. So are you saying my parents were bad? Is that some of the disconnect there?
I think so. I think that with education, more people are starting to realize that the way my parents did it was not correct. But I think, again, that's slowly coming along. Otherwise, it's still that belief that we're not doing anything wrong. So I think it'd be a little bit of both of that.
Gotcha. So what do you think? And this is a similar question, but beyond what we just talked about in terms of that kind of conservative nature, moving slowly, what are some of the root causes that you see? And Tameka, I'll start with you, that are causing this number to be high.
So I've always said that the biggest thing for me is education. So just going back to that, you only know how to raise your kids by the way you were raised. So your upbringing plays, a huge percentage in how you're going to raise your kids. If you don't know anything more, if you don't have any more tools than what you were raised with, then how are you going to know any different? And so I feel like educating the community, we have parent education around the community, and I think if we get more strong in that area, that it would help in that aspect. I really do not believe, for the most part, that people want to abuse their kids or neglect their kids. They just don't have those tools and that education behind them and weren't raised in that environment that taught them any different.
Yeah. So Terri, what about you? What do you see as some of the root causes?
Like Tameka was saying, we need more preventative services. We need to educate our families. As we advocate for all these families, we need to show them the support they need, even coming up with support groups. Families need to know that they're not alone, that they don't have to be quiet now. It's okay to ask for help. I know back then, as a child growing up, my dad was a very humble man, but he was very prideful also, and in the Hispanic culture, I'll say, I'll speak on behalf of my dad. He was always, no, we got this, we got this, we got this. We were a big family, but he made sure that our light was on, our gas was on. We weren't homeless, but there was times we had to do without. We knew what it was to go hungry sometimes. But if we show these families that there's support and we can educate them as far as having available the resources they need, we can cut this down.
Yeah. Angelina, I do want to hear what you think the root causes are, but that does kind of bring up the question that I also wanted to ask about what role poverty plays. And Terri, your answer just kind of lends itself to that. So it seems like that's kind of where you were pointing, that poverty and a lack of a living wage in our area seems to be one of these reasons. So can you speak on that a little bit more? Like what role does poverty play in this?
Well, take for example the pandemic that just hit us, COVID. It stopped the whole world. I think a lot of times people want to think, oh my gosh, I could never be in prison. I could never be in jail. I wouldn't be able to handle it. But if we stop and really think and just kind of focus, we experienced that. The whole world stopped. Right after spring break, I remember that. Just got back from spring break. Next day I'm at work and it's like, okay, you have to pack up your stuff and go work from home. It was like you couldn't go out anywhere. You couldn't even go grocery shop. You couldn't even visit your family. That is your main support, is family. And when COVID hit us, it took a lot of jobs away also.
Yeah.
Many teachers had to work from home. They're the main people that see our kids and see the needs. Because a lot of times, like Tameka and Angelina were saying, they see more of the front line. When a child needs help or a child is crying for help, they're going to know.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So Angelina, what about you? What do you see as the root causes? One of the root causes.
Yeah, just in agreement with my ladies here, Tameka and Terri. It is lack of understanding, lack of awareness, lack of skills and education. We do, and I teach a parenting class, and when I do that, it's changing that mindset. We're not, as mothers, when we have our children, we're not given a handbook of this is how you do it right. So we parent off of what we know and what we experienced, and it can be, this didn't work for me, and so I'm going to parent totally opposite from what I experienced as a child, or, hey, it was good enough for me. I'm alive. I'm going to get to the next, I'm going to just continue to do it. But that's also where you see the cycles of child abuse happen, because a lot of what we see in the work that we do are children that were in foster care or had a case as a child in the foster care or child protective services system, now are parents in the same situation. So it's just not knowing that there's a different way. That it's not knowing who to reach out to for help. And there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of stigma that comes with that. If I go and I admit that I didn't do it right, what does that make me? And it makes you nothing. It makes you a human being. It makes you someone that just needs help and support. And you're stressed, and you're, whether that's lack of money. We talk about poverty. Poverty does play a big role in abuse, because if you can't keep the lights on, that's automatically deemed neglect. If you can't put food on the table, that's neglect. And like Tameka said, I don't believe that parents intentionally seek out to hurt their children. They just don't understand a better way. Or, maybe there is pride that gets in the way, or maybe there's just, I don't even have a car to get to the resources to help me pay for my bills or help me put food on the table. So how do we connect those things?
Mm-hmm. And Tameka, how do you feel that poverty plays into this?
So poverty plays a huge part, obviously. If you can't make ends meet, that causes stress in the family. When they're stressed with the parents, then that stress is going to be taken on to the kids. You're a better parent the less stressed you are. You're more able to handle your kids in a more efficient way. Mm-hmm. However, I think that's it's a big piece, but I think it's just a part. I mean, if we look at even affluent families, like there's struggles there that are not as obvious, I guess, in the community. But as we see things go on in the news, I mean, in the community, period, with kids that are not, or families that are not in poverty, there's still a big gap there with parenting and that education. Now, it looks different because the stressors obviously are going to be different. They're not worried about putting food on the table or having their electricity cut off. But there are so many variables to parenting and what can cause us not to be that best parent that I believe it's community-wide. It's just, like I said, it's more obvious with the poverty-ridden homes.
Right. Well, go ahead, Angelina.
Jump in and intervene. Tameka brings up such a good point, because it's so easily to say, this family doesn't have the money to take care of their child, so therefore they are neglectful. That's not the case. That's not the case. They just need the resources. And that's why preventative programs are so important, because you can step in with those resources and provide the stability needed until we can get that family back up on their feet. So that it's not intentional neglect, but we see it as neglect, because we're coming from a place, a different perspective. I wouldn't do this for my children, so therefore we're automatically passing judgment on a family that loves their kids. That will do anything for their kids. They just maybe they don't have that GED that they need to get a better job, or maybe they are working 2 jobs and it's still not giving enough because they have 5 or 6 children. It's so much more than just income, because Tameka's right. The abuse happens worldwide through all kinds of socioeconomic statuses. It's not just low income families.
Right. Well, and maybe a better way of framing that question, and I'll re-ask it, is how does poverty get translated into child abuse? Like, that might be like what people are seeing is actually poverty, and they're calling it child abuse. Is that kind of what happens on, like, maybe is that what we're seeing in Lubbock being so high, is that it's not child abuse that's so high, it's actually our poverty level that might be higher than other cities. And so that is getting turned into, what is being defined as child abuse. Does that make sense? Is that maybe one of the things we're seeing here? is the misunderstanding of poverty. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I would say definitely that could definitely be a reason or something that you need to investigate further.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's definitely a stigma that comes with, not having money. Like I said before, a parent may be working 2 jobs, but it's still not enough to pay the electric bill and the rent. If your rent is $800, and rent is crazy in Lubbock, but if your rent is $800 for a 2-bedroom and you have an electric bill that's another $300, but you're only bringing in $500, what happens? You pick and choose what's the most important. We need a roof over our head, because if we're out in the streets, then somebody's gonna report that to CPS or Child Protective Service. But then again, if you're trying to pay your electric bill and it's winter outside and you don't have enough money to do that, then you're getting a report because your kids are suffering for that. I don't. And so what does that do? That instills fear in families. So they recluse. They end up isolating themselves. They don't want to share their issues because of fear of being reported.
Yeah. Yeah, because, specifically here in Lubbock, both our electricity and our natural gas bills are going up. Natural gas, that's on the state level. They were given permission to charge people more. Electricity, now that we've joined ERCOT, those prices are going up. So our cost of living expenses are increasing, but our wages are not. And so yeah, if we were already living on the edge and now suddenly my gas bill is, $20, $30, $40 higher, then we have to make decisions. Terri, did you have something?
Yes, I'd like to add to what Angelina said about, the stress, and Tameka as well. Once they get so stressed and they're worrying about all this stuff, they can go into depression. And then that causes them to go, there's something else, fall back. And that can lead also to neglect. And then there they get a case. But because they're so stressed out about how they're going to pay the next bill, how they're going to get the next meal on the table, things like that, some of us really take for granted, what we have and don't have.
Right. Well, and I think, probably obviously they're not going to, they don't have the opportunity to prioritize their own mental health. And so, if I'm stressed about putting food on the table, I'm not going to take the time and spend the money, to go see a counselor, to get that help. Because even if they have access to free healthcare or mental health care services, they might not be willing to take that time. It could be really, really difficult to get to. So let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about how we help our community do this. And so I know all of you are involved in organizations that is what you're trying to do, is you are trying to help serve our community, help this problem. And so, Angelina, I'm going to start with you. So tell us more about the work that you do with your nonprofit and some of the programs or things that are there to help these families.
Well, in the program that I direct and run, it's broken up in 3 stages. So we have engagement, equipping, and elevation. And so in engagement, that's all it is building relationships with the Lubbock community, building relationships with families, letting people know that there is a friend in the community that sees the need, that hears the need, and that wants to help with the need. And so we provide free community events. We had health fair that just collaboration with other agencies. We had the Lubbock Community Health Center bring their mobile clinic and provided immunizations and COVID vaccinations and flu shots absolutely free. So we do this absolutely free in the community. And then to go a bit further and really equip families, so seeing that skill sets need to be developed, we work with them by providing parenting classes, adult education classes, financial literacy, and then whatever else. We can create a program or create like a empowerment group, for example, to help with those needs, whether that is self-esteem or domestic violence, addressing those issues, whatever the case may be. And that's the beauty of the program and the beauty of knowing Tameka and Terri, because we all collaborate together, because we all have that mission in mind, and that's to serve the Lubbock community and all the families that are in need in the Lubbock community. And then we have programs that are called family coaching, counseling as well, to actually work one-on-one with families that want to see transformation in their lives by being specific, setting goals, and walking them through those goals step by step.
And how do people access that family coaching?
They just call us. So that's the beauty of our program that we have, is there is no requirements. We are 100% privately funded, and that's through donations and donors and whatnot. And so they just need to reach out to us. If you want coaching, you just have to have a child in your custody under the age of 18, and we work with you. So that's the beauty of our program. And I love it. I love it working with Terri and with Tameka, because we can catch those families that don't quite fit into their programs. We're the net. We're the net here to catch those, so nobody falls through the crack.
Excellent. So Tameka, what about you? Like what programs do you work with that are out there trying to solve these issues?
So we have similar programs as well. We work with Kinship. We have case management for them, as well as support group. We do parent education and caregiver empowerment groups. We also have another program that's the preventative part, the most preventative and intensive part of our 3 programs. And mostly what we do there is just the in-home case management. But I think the most important part, and Terri kind of hit on it earlier, is going along with the poverty, where we can't just see it as poverty, and we get a breakdown of exactly what's going on with these families through our assessments that tells us if this is mental health or things to that matter. And so it could be that we're not getting mental health needs being met, or there's just so many things there that may look like poverty, but we get a breakdown of from the time they were born, from what they could remember in their childhood to where they are now, to kind of tell us where we need to serve these families to make it better for them, to where it's not such a stressful environment in raising these kids. So I think a lot of that, for the most part, I feel like is the best part of our assessing our families in whatever program that we have right now, to see where they need those needs met to be able to be that better parent and lessen those stresses there.
Yeah. And Terri, so they both mentioned your program. So tell us about Kinship Navigation, and you're the founder of that. So that's really cool. So tell us, why and what it does.
Okay, to begin, yes, it is the first program here in the Panhandle and West Texas area. First Kinship program. And I actually came around to building this program because I myself am kinship. So when I became a kinship caretaker, I was stressed. I was living on very low income because I had just stopped working because I was going to go to school full time to show my girls that, hey, you need an education. Well, then I get that unexpected call, like many kinship caretakers. We need your help. And a lot of times, you're not going to turn your back on family. There's times when you're like, well, how can I help them? There's just no way. I'm not working. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And I didn't have support. I didn't have anyone to help me as far as resources. I had nothing. Single parent, which was very hard to begin with, as many single parents go through struggles. But now I was able to work for an agency that allowed me to build this program. And I look at it now, it's like, if I'm going to support this child, I'm going to support this family also to be successful. And if it means giving them the tools that they need as far as preventative services, educational workshops, resource fairs, support groups. We just also started up a Kinship Alliance group where like Angelina and Tameka both come into our meetings and we share information about anything that's happening in Lubbock, events, resources, anything you can think of, we're sharing to be able to share with our families, to be able to educate our families about the things there is, so they don't feel like, oh, where can I go? What can I do? You know, where I work at, we do have the Parent Empowerment Program, which helps single parents, you know, if they want an education to get out of low income, we have that. We have the Family and Youth Success Program, providing counseling for kiddos from 6 to 17. You know, we do serve Lubbock and the 29 surrounding counties. So that's a big area we cover. And I do include Tameka and Angelina in those events also. So that is just great. Like we were talking about earlier, it takes a community to be able to tackle this, because one person alone can't do it. Not one agency alone can do it. You know, I've always said we all have a calling and there's a time for it. And I think this is our calling, and we're going to tackle this down because this is something that needs to be taken care of. But like I was saying, you know, the Kinship Navigation is a program there that uses in-house resources. You know, we use our direct client assistance, we use our resale center, immigration department, our family engagement programs. We all collaborate with one another. Because, you know, April, as y'all know, it's a month to recognize the importance of family and communities as they all work together to strengthen families and prevent child abuse and neglect as well. But like we were all talking and mentioning, you know, if we educate our families and advocate for them and give them the support they need, we can protect our children and provide the thriving skills they need to be a successful family.
Yeah, that's. I think that's really beautiful, because I think a lot of times we feel very hopeless in these, you know, in these moments.
And that was me. That was me at one point. And you know, a lot of times, you know, it's not an important. And I've seen this a lot when people like, well, that's really not important right now. But it's important once it hits their home. That's when they see the importance. But we should see the importance of it every day, because we just don't know who it could be. Yeah, absolutely. So then what are things that our city or community at large could do to help this? And so as y'all were talking, one thing that came up that I wrote down was public transportation. Like it seems like, you know, that could be one way that we might not think about. Like there's obviously not a clear tie between child abuse prevention and public transportation. However, that seems like it might take some of that stress. It might offer a different kind of resource that we don't necessarily have. So are there things that maybe as that the city could do that would help? Like, or like, do you think that would be helpful? Or am I just kind of talking out of my ignorance that public transportation would be a way to help this issue?
Yeah, I think so. I know that for myself, the facility that we have is like a couple of miles away from the local bus stop. So, I mean, yeah, it would help to have that resource there for someone to tap into that could get a ride to their local resource center, wherever that may be. But I think the first step is that the community just get involved. Like, it's a community issue. Lubbock is number 2 in child abuse. That's Lubbock. That is a community. That is not just saying, hey, those people on that side of town are the issue. No, it is a community issue. And I would say get involved however you can. Plug into a program. I know that building relationships, we're always looking for volunteers to help in our program. We're always looking for someone that has a special skill or talent or something that would want to participate in a summer camp and teach our kids, or would want to teach some of our families that we're working with. I know that Tameka and Terri also too look for volunteers. That's how the community can get involved. That's how the community can share this responsibility and mitigate a lot of risks that are in the Lubbock area. That's how Lubbock can show families that we are a community, we are united, and we care.
Yeah. Terri, you seemed like you had an answer. So what do you?
Well, I'm with Angelina. Letting these families know it's okay to ask for help. It's okay. When Lubbock has, I think it was said, and correct me if I'm wrong, y'all, I think we had 11,147 that were labeled as abuse and neglect. Was that correct? Yeah. I mean, when it's that high, we have to be that voice for these children, and I'm not saying not the children, but families in general, the parents. How can we help you? What needs do you have? Not the needs that I think you need, but what are your needs? You tell me and see. And that's what I want to hear from like kinship families. What are your needs? Not what I think you need, not what the state thinks you need or anybody needs. What are your needs?
Yeah. I mean that, yeah. So Tameka, what about you? What do you think that the city or community could do to help this?
I think as far as the city and the community, we could use more partnerships. We've come a long way in being more of let's get together, all of us, to help this family rather than we got it on our own, let this agency just do it and y'all do what you're doing. We've come a long way there, but I think we have a ways to go as well. These ladies are great, Angelina and Terri, as far as partnerships. There's been some bumps in the road in I'd say the 8 years that I've been at the specific job that I have been, to where it's kind of hard to partner in some areas with some people. And I understand when you're looking at numbers and you're looking at funding coming in, you want to make sure that you're serving just as many people as you need to get that funding. And so there's a little fear there sometimes, I think, of letting somebody else come in and help out. Think we're getting there, but we have a ways to go there. As far as the transportation, I know there was actually a committee. I wasn't on it long, but they were trying to do more with the zones and like the bus and putting the bus stops in different areas of the community to where they were more accessible. I also think another thing there is that we need to put our heads together as far as the city and community and figure out different strategies of transportation, because I have families, I know right now in our caseload, I'm just going to throw it out there, that don't want to ride the public transportation or the Medicaid transportation because they're uncomfortable. And that just may mean one of us getting on there with them and saying, hey, this is how that goes, to make them feel more comfortable. But I think we have to have other opportunities for transportation as well and give them other means of transportation to decide how they want to get to doctor's appointments or things like that, because I don't think all families are comfortable with the means that we have at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like one kind of common theme that keeps coming up is that families get so, we have a culture that says you have to do it yourself, even to the point of if you cannot drive your own car yourself for your family, then you should be, then that's a problem. So how can we maybe start to try to change that culture of kind of, whether we want to call it bootstrap, or that individualist, like, do you think there's a way that we can start changing that and start showing people like being part of a community is good, needing help and asking for help is that's not a bad thing? Like, how do we start changing that?
Again, it goes back to educating our families.
Yeah.
Education's the main thing. Letting them know there's help, there's support, there's resources. A lot of times they can just go on the computer. And nowadays, not only do you have a laptop, you have phones. Everybody carries a phone. You might forget your coffee at home. but you know what? There's a Starbucks down the street. But when you forget your phone, I guarantee you're going to turn back around and go get your phone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you always have some means of being able to connect. But like, again, we have to educate our families. We have to let them know there is help.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to about what Tameka was saying about numbers. When I started the Kinship Program, we also had to come up with numbers. But the way I looked at it and the way I approached it was, I can help you now, but programs only do for a certain period of time. I want to know that I can refer my families out to another agency, which I know Angelina and Tameka both, they're going to take them in because I know and it's just helping these families. We can help them for a certain amount of time, but let's say they need more support, more resources. I'm going to refer you over to the MCH Grandparent Gap Program. I'm going to refer you over to the Buckners and mini programs that they have, because that is continuing to educate our families, give them resources, and help them to strengthen their families' engagement and be more successful. And that's what we want for our families, to be successful.
Yeah. So Angelina, you were talking about volunteers, and I have a feeling that when people hear that, like myself, that I would go, but I don't know that I can offer anything. And so you said like special skills. What are you looking for? Like what can they bring? What can they offer?
They can bring heart, they can bring passion, they can bring understanding and an awareness. When I say special skill, I mean, that is anything. I can read a book to a child. I can sit and be a buddy to a child during a camp, or you know what? I'm a mom, and I feel like I'm a successful mother. I'm handling my business. I'm doing this, that, and the other. Let me mentor another young mother that needs that leadership, that needs that mentorship to help, because maybe they don't have a stable family that they can turn to. Many of us don't. I know I myself don't have a family that I can turn to in regards to a mother or father, because they are deceased. So that would be nice to have someone that is a mother figure in my life to be able to turn to and say, hey, how did you work through this? You've done it, and to have that connection. So it doesn't necessarily, when I say skill or talent, it doesn't need to be anything of extravagance. Like, it's the simple life skills that you have to offer, the friendships that you have to offer, the want and desire to just be there with someone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that has come up a lot in some of the community work I've done, and even on last week's show, is proximity. The fact that, and especially in our city, like we're able to segregate ourselves very easily. And I think a lot of cities do. I think Lubbock is actually a little like, I think it's a little more segregated than we want to admit, both in terms of race and socioeconomics, and just in kind of different culture. That South Lubbock is very different, even towards, kind of Northwest Lubbock, which it's not, they're both kind of the same demographically, in terms of socioeconomics and race, but it's still different. And so how powerful do you think that proximity is of having families or having people who aren't struggling with these issues, getting in proximities with these families to help understand, to help? Like, do you feel like that is something our community might be lacking? Are those moments to get in proximity with one another?
Well, I can say that child abuse and neglect doesn't see discrimination. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter how segregated our city is. It's in each and every one of our quadrants. Mm-hmm. It's each and every one of our neighborhoods. I was reading an article, 13 out of 1,000 children in Lubbock are affected by this. So it really, there is no discrimination. Now, as far as proximity and things of that sort, it may just be, that's the expectation. When you look at lower income neighborhoods and families, that's kind of the stigma and the expectation and the stereotype. You're going to see that, but that's also where disproportionality comes in as well. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Whereas you may go more south, west Lubbock, and it's a secret. It's quiet. It's
Right.
like what stays in the home stays in the home. What happens here stays here. And it's not disclosed. But then again, why, that child's safety is at risk and is vulnerable because they feel like, well, I'm going to upset my parents. If I say anything, it's going to bring a dishonor to our families. It's going to tarnish our reputation in the community because that's just what we're taught.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't look at those wealthier communities or those thriving communities and sit there and say there's despair there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in the shadows. It is definitely there. It's just in the shadows.
Well, and even with that, like, how do we? Is there maybe my question doesn't really have an answer. Like, how do we create proximity even there? And again, like my question might not have an answer,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we create proximity with the kids experiencing these issues wherever they are in the city? How do we create that? How do we get there? Tameka?
I feel like it's so separated.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the answer to how, because this is a City of Lubbock community thing, not East Lubbock community or South or West. Yeah. And that's a hard job, I'm pretty sure, to do, is to get community as one, as a city together on that, because we have kids in one area that feel like kids in another area are going through something totally different than them. And in reality, they have a lot of similarities. We even, and I'm just getting on my soapbox real quick, but we even have grants for certain zip codes. And so only those kids are involved in certain activities. So it doesn't pull in other kids across the city that may have those same needs and need to be in that same group and understand that they're not alone just in a certain part of town. Mm-hmm. So how we get there, I don't know. But we definitely need to start to try to go that way, because I think that's a big portion of it. And I understand they want to do more in certain zip codes for kids, but again, there's that segregation that we're doing there. So if my kid is over here without a father in the south part of town, does that make him any different from the kid over on the east side that still needs to be in this same community project, getting those same needs met?
Right. Well, and that does, like, that actually brings up an issue going back to transportation, where, like I was aware of the committee and the surveys being done about, transportation. One of the things that was often discussed was the fact that in East Lubbock, if you were in the Dunbar Manhattan neighborhood and wanted to go to the United on Parkway, you had to get on the bus, go across the interstate, go to the downtown station, get on another bus, cross the interstate again, to go to that United, and then do it all over again. That ignores the fact that our bus service stops at 82nd Street or maybe 98th, but one of those two. And so there are, there is low-income housing in South Lubbock that has no access to public transportation. And you're right, these things do often get forgotten because of the zip codes, because of that. And so like seeing Lubbock as one community is definitely something that we struggle with, and I do think would be really helpful. So we're coming to the end of our time, but I have one question for all of you. I'd like to end on a positive note. I think we did. I think what we're hearing is that there are ways that we can help, change these problems. But I wanted to ask each of you, what gives you hope? And this could be, from the topics that we're talking about to just life or our city in general. But what gives you hope? And Angelina, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. So what fires and fuels my hope are knowing that I have friends and collaborations like Tameka, like Terri in the community, that our mission and our focus is aligned. And it gives me hope because I know that they're doing everything they can do on their side of town, and Terri's doing everything she can do on her side of town. And we all come together monthly and we celebrate that victory. We acknowledge the needs, and that gives me hope because relationship gives me hope. And I know that each and every one of us are building relationships with many others in the community, and that's just going to spread our mission, our focus, and the help needed in Lubbock.
Yeah. And what about you, Tameka? Oh.
Seeing the change in the families. And so when you start with a family that began here and you see all the progress that they have made and know that it's possible and that our community can help in making that possible for families. And then those families that come to you for the help. I mean, we have some families that are kind of pushed to you to get that extra support, but those that come on their own, I mean, that's what really gives me that hope that those families want change and they want a difference made in their lives. They want a better life for their kids. And so that's the biggest thing that I see in the community that really gives me hope.
Yeah. And Terri, we'll end with you.
Oh. Well, brings me hope to be able to get up every morning and know that I am going to make a difference in someone's life. And that is my goal every day, to get up and make a difference in someone's life. And having support and being able to collaborate with like Angelina and Tameka and many other agencies gives you more of a empowerment feeling like, hey, we got this, we can do this. And we're going to provide these families with services, support, and any resource they may need.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work y'all do and how y'all are helping me. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
No problem. So we talked a lot about the culture of Lubbock today. And towards the beginning, we mentioned how the conservative nature of our area sometimes keeps people from getting the education they need or reaching out for help, because we have this mindset of this is the way it's always been done. So this is the way it should be done. And that's really not a great excuse to keep doing things the way we're doing them. And so I hope if you are struggling with any of the things we discussed, whether it's paying for your utilities to accessing mental health care, that we can provide you with some of those resources and we can get you some of that access. And so if you do need help, don't be ashamed to reach out. Like we all need help sometimes. And I think one thing that I've seen in Lubbock and part of this aspect of the conservatism is that we see people who need help as very different from the people who give help. And there are certain people who give help and there are certain people who need help. And that's not the way life works. We all need help at some point, and we can all offer help at some point. So if you are someone who needs help in the moment or who has needed help in the past, just know that you are going to have a time in your life when you're going to be the one who's helping someone. And so it's okay to ask for help now, because in the future, you're going to be the one who's able to offer that help. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and I'll see you next time.